Have you ever felt like you were breaking into 1,000 pieces inside? As if something were silently tearing apart right there, at the core of your being? Maybe you tried to ignore it, pretend everything was fine, but it wasn't. There are moments in life when we feel as if something within us is slowly breaking. It's not a physical pain, but an internal sensation, hard to explain, as though the very structure that once held up our emotions and certainties is collapsing without warning. It's common to try and ignore this feeling, to drown it in distractions, throw ourselves into the busyness of daily life, hoping it will pass like a storm. But despite all efforts, it remains, persistent, silent. Over time, we begin to realize it's not just sadness or exhaustion. There's something deeper happening. It's as if a part of us is waking from a long sleep, as if a light is beginning to shine through the darkness, revealing truths that were once buried under layers of illusion. What once gave us meaning seems to have lost its shine. The goals that once drove us no longer spark excitement. The relationships we thought were essential now show their fragility. And the world around us, which once appeared vibrant and full of promise, now reveals a rawer, more real, and often painful face. This shift in perception, this feeling of disconnection, is often automatically labeled as depression. After all, it's easier to give a clinical name to what we can't understand than to dive deep into the true nature of what we're feeling. But what if this sadness, this existential emptiness, isn't a sign of illness? What if it's a sign of awakening consciousness? What if this inner rupture is actually a transition, a call to see the world with new eyes? Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most daring and provocative philosophers of modern thought, believed that human suffering, far from being a mistake or failure, was the first indication that we're beginning to see reality for what it truly is. For him, suffering, disillusionment, and emptiness are not signs of weakness, but the first manifestations of a soul waking up from illusion. The psychic pain we feel when everything seems to lose meaning is not a collapse. It is a necessary rupture with the lie we were taught to live. When the mind begins to question imposed values, manufactured desires, and false promises of happiness, discomfort is inevitable. After all, seeing the truth is painful. Realizing that much of what we've pursued in life might be meaningless is a shock most people try to avoid at all costs. But avoiding this pain also means avoiding the possibility of freedom. What you're going to hear today is not a self-help manual. It's not a step-by-step guide to happiness. This is an invitation to reflect on what your pain might be trying to show you. A proposal to look at what you're feeling not as a sign of weakness, but as the beginning of an inner revolution. Through Schopenhauer's philosophy, we will understand why this deep discomfort may, paradoxically, be your greatest ally, and why so often what seems like the end is, in fact, the exact point where consciousness begins to be born. Stay with me until the end of this reflection, because maybe, by better understanding what's happening inside you, sadness will cease to be an enemy and begin to be seen for what it truly is, the first step toward your inner freedom. For Schopenhauer, what we perceive as reality is nothing more than an illusion, an elaborate stage built by our own wills, desires, and expectations. The world, as we perceive it, is only a representation, a distorted reflection of what is, not of what it seems to be. According to him, we are trapped in a grand theater where everything around us operates under an invisible script, written not by reason, but by the unending thirst to want more, to have more, to be more. This illusion was named by him as the veil of Maya, a millennia-old concept borrowed from Indian philosophy, describing the world as a kind of enchanted mist, capable of covering the truth with seductive images, promises of happiness, and structures that make us believe that everything we desire is, in fact, essential. But it's not. The veil doesn't just cover our eyes from birth. It also shapes our way of feeling, thinking, and desiring. It makes us chase fantasies and call that chase purpose. Stop and think. How many times have you believed that reaching a certain goal would change everything inside you? How many times have you focused all your strength, your thoughts, and your energy into achieving something? A career, a person, a status, and, upon attaining it, felt an even greater emptiness than before. It's a cruel paradox, because if we were promised that success would bring fulfillment, why is it so often accompanied by a silent, internal discomfort? That's the power of illusion. It convinces us that the next thing, the next victory, the next experience will finally be enough to fill the hole we feel inside. But that hole cannot be filled with external achievements, because it isn't made from the absence of things. It is made from the absence of ourselves. The truth is that we live anesthetized, numbed by a system of desires that feeds on itself and is never satisfied. We live in function of the next reward. And at the same time that we desire, we suffer. Because to desire, as Schopenhauer said, is to recognize that something is still missing. To desire is to admit we are incomplete. And living with this constant sense of lack keeps us trapped in a cycle of frustration disguised as ambition. And then, one day, something begins to crumble. The illusion slowly starts to unravel. Old promises lose their meaning. The rewards no longer shine the way they used to, and what once motivated us now feels empty. At that moment, many believe they are going through a crisis, an emotional breakdown, maybe even depression. But what if, contrary to what you've been told, this is actually the beginning of a true awakening? What if the unease we feel as our illusions break down is actually the first sign that we are finally starting to see things as they really are? What if this pain is nothing more than the side effect of tearing off the veil from our eyes and facing the world without the filters of desire and fantasy? Most of us were taught to pursue, to chase, to conquer. But very few were taught to pause, to observe, and to understand. We live on autopilot. We wake up, we work, we consume, we distract ourselves, we sleep, and repeat. All of this within a narrative shaped by forces we often can't even identify, yet we accept them as absolute truths. When you begin to question this, unease sets in. And with it comes a sense of disconnection from the world around you. You start to notice that most people are living according to imposed goals, fabricated standards, models that promise happiness but deliver only anxiety. And maybe this is where you find yourself now, in that uncomfortable space where the old answers no longer work, but the new ones haven't arrived yet. It's unstable ground, yes, but also fertile ground, because only when the veil begins to fall do we get the chance to see what lies behind it. And what lies behind is reality, bare, unadorned, unmasked. It's the silence that remains when the screaming of illusion finally fades. So if you're feeling lost, tired, empty, maybe it's not the end. Maybe it's the beginning of something no one ever told you about. The beginning of lucidity. The moment when you begin to realize that most of the things you thought you wanted, maybe they were never truly yours to begin with. You've probably heard the phrase, ignorance is bliss. It's often repeated, sometimes mockingly, but behind it lies a truth that Schopenhauer deeply understood. He knew that opening our eyes to reality is a painful process. The awakening of consciousness is not an easy or comfortable path. It wounds, because seeing clearly requires destroying many of the certainties that once made us feel safe, even if they were illusions. Those who begin to awaken feel a different kind of pain. It's not just sadness, not just an ordinary emptiness. It's a kind of inner rupture. On one side, there's the urge to keep living as before, to maintain appearances, to follow the rules of the game. But on the other side, a silent repulsion begins to grow. A natural rejection of the superficial, the automatic, the emptiness of relationships based on convenience and self-interest. What once seemed fulfilling now feels false. What once excited now only exhausts. It's at this point that many people enter into crisis. Life, which once appeared at least somewhat coherent, begins to lose all meaning. Motivations weaken, pleasures become repetitive, and the feeling of being out of place in the world intensifies. This phase is often mistaken for depression. After all, what else could explain this loss of enthusiasm, this silent pain, this deep weariness with everything? But Schopenhauer offers us another way to interpret it. Maybe this isn't a breakdown. Maybe it's a revelation, a sign that consciousness is beginning to emerge. When you start to see the world without the veil of illusions, what once seemed right, desirable, or beautiful may reveal its true nature, often distorted, corrupted, or entirely meaningless. And that hurts. The pain comes from the contrast between the illusion that once made us feel safe and the raw truth we now begin to perceive. The soul feels that impact, and the first reaction is usually denial. Some people try to silence the pain with distractions, overwork, addictions, endless entertainment. Others turn to medication, attempting to numb the discomfort without understanding its origin. It's an understandable attempt to keep functioning in a world that no longer makes sense. But there are those who make a different choice. They choose not to run. They choose to face the pain head-on. Not because they are stronger, but because, on some level, they intuitively sense that this pain is necessary, that it has something to reveal. And it's in this dive into discomfort that something extraordinary begins to take shape. The possibility of a deeper truth, one that is more honest, more liberating. Because the truth, however unsettling, has the power to set us free. When we stop pretending, when we stop accepting what we've been told as the only possible path, we begin to draw closer to ourselves. We start to discover what truly has value, what genuinely matters, what quietly sustains the soul, not just the image we show to others. Yes, awakening hurts, but not because something is wrong with you. It hurts because you're starting to see, and seeing in today's world is almost an act of resistance. It means giving up the anesthesia. It means seeing the ugliness behind the glitter. It means accepting that the comfort of ignorance must be left behind if we want to live with more truth. That's why, despite everything, the pain of awakening is sacred, because it marks the beginning of a new cycle. A cycle in which you stop living on autopilot and start existing with more presence. Where you begin to question what you once blindly accepted. Where you feel more deeply, even if that means suffering more. Because in the end, only those who truly feel can also truly live. Schopenhauer said that what moves the world is the will. Not rational will, but a blind, irrational, relentless will. You feel it. I feel it. We are all ruled by it. This will keeps us running nonstop. We want more. We want to be more. We want to prove we are someone. But it's never enough. The problem is, this will is never satisfied. And each new achievement only feeds the cycle. The pain you feel is not your fault. It's a symptom of an inner system sickened by the slavery of wanting. Consciousness begins when you start to say, maybe I don't need this. Maybe I don't need to be admired. Maybe I just need to be free. And that's when something shifts. While everyone else is chasing happiness, Schopenhauer suggests the opposite. Renounce. Renounce the ego. Renounce the desire for control. Renounce the endless wanting. He's not talking about becoming a monk or abandoning life, but about recognizing the illusion of desire and freeing yourself from it. Because when you stop wanting, you begin to perceive, and what you perceive is that beauty lies in what is, not in what's missing. Peace doesn't come from achievement, it comes from silence, from the embraced emptiness, from a soul that no longer fights against the world. Try to imagine, for a moment, someone who has lost everything they once thought was important. Financial stability, social prestige, the bonds that once filled their time. And yet, that person is at peace. Not a fake peace that masks suffering, but a real serenity, a silent presence, firm and inexplicably light. At first glance, this seems contradictory. How can someone lose so much and not fall into despair? The answer lies in consciousness. This person is not numb. It's not apathy, emotional coldness, or escape. It's clarity. The clarity of someone who has learned to see beyond the surface and find meaning where most would only see ruin. Think of people who, by choice, decided to live with less, who gave up excess prestige status, and instead chose to cultivate a simpler life, a quieter life, a life more connected to what really matters. These people, often invisible in the eyes of society, live with a deeper purpose. They're not trying to conquer the world. They're trying not to be conquered by it. We can also remember artists, philosophers, monks, and thinkers throughout history, human beings who went through intense personal pain, existential crises, long periods of silence and solitude, and who, instead of fleeing, found a way inward. They transformed suffering into language, emptiness into art, silence into wisdom, not because they sought applause or recognition, but because they realized that true freedom is not found outside. It happens within. This inner freedom doesn't depend on ideal circumstances. It needs no applause, no validation. It's a state of awareness that begins when we stop fighting what we can't control and start inhabiting who we truly are. An intimate but powerful space, a kind of freedom no one can take from you. And it's important to say, you can live like this too. You don't need to renounce the world or isolate yourself to find clarity. But you can choose to look more consciously at your life. You can question your desires, your motivations, your fears. You can create a space of presence, even amid chaos. You can stop being a hostage to a system that demands more than you can give, and begin to relate to life more authentically. You may not change the entire world, but you can change your way of being in it, and that, in itself, is an act of transformation. A conscious life is not built on grand external revolutions. It's built on small internal decisions made every day, in silence. And little by little, that's how we stop being prisoners of illusion and begin to truly live. You are not broken. You are awakening. And awakening hurts because it demands the death of old versions of yourself and facing reality through the eyes of the soul. The pain you feel is consciousness breaking the chains of illusion. You are not a failure. You are not weak. You are someone who has started to see too much in a world that prefers you see nothing. But now that you see, what will you do with it? Will you go back to sleep? Or will you walk awake, even if it costs you the comfort of illusion? Schopenhauer was never a philosopher of easy promises. He didn't try to sweeten reality with comforting ideas. He didn't speak of happiness as a destination, nor did he paint life as light and optimistic. Instead, he offered something more honest and far more challenging. He offered freedom, but this freedom doesn't come wrapped in certainty or accompanied by euphoria. It comes with a truth that many avoid facing. Life, by its very nature, involves suffering. To desire, to lose, to change, to face time, the body, our limits, all of that hurts. But there's a crucial difference between suffering in the dark and suffering with your eyes open, between being crushed by what we don't understand and walking through pain with awareness. To suffer with awareness is to turn suffering into learning. It's to resist with dignity. It's to realize that there's something behind the pain, something that can reveal forgotten parts of ourselves. Because sometimes, when you feel broken, what's happening isn't the end. It's the beginning of a quiet reconstruction. a dismantling of everything that wasn't real to make space for what is. In these moments, the most important thing is not to rush to fix what you feel. It's to stop, breathe, observe. Pay attention to your thoughts, your impulses, your automatic reactions. Start questioning your desires. Ask yourself, what am I really chasing? What am I trying to fill? What still holds me captive? This practice of self-observation is a way to break out of living on autopilot. It's where awakening begins, a path back to your essence, to what is truly yours before any influence, obligation, or social expectation. Read with open eyes, reflect deeply, and most of all, be skeptical of everything that comes ready-made, of anything that demands you not think, but simply consume, follow, accept. The truth is almost always uncomfortable. It asks you to let go of what was easy, of what was familiar. But still, it is the truth that heals. And when you begin to walk that path, even slowly, even silently, your life stops being driven by the noise of illusion and starts being guided by the power of clarity. In the description of this video, you'll find a reading list with books that will deepen this reflection. Books that may open your eyes even more or confirm what you already feel, but haven't yet found the words to explain. And now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt that what others call your weakness might actually be your strength awakening? Have you ever thought that your sadness could be the voice of your consciousness crying out for a life with more truth? Write in the comments below. Share your experience, your doubts, your perspective. Could help others who are also waking up. And never forget, question everything, always, even yourself, because only then will you stay awake.